Hello, I'm Michael Topham, technical writer for digital photo, and welcome to this second masterclass feathering video. In the first video, we took a basic look at how we could use feathering and different feather radiuses to soften the edges of our selections and prevent against any hard selection edges. In this video, we're going to go one step further and put everything we learnt in the first video to good use with our start image rnli.jpg, which can be found in the Start Images folder on the CD. As well as using the feather selection dialog box early on in this technique, we'll also be using the Refine Edge command, which gives us an excellent visual view of how feathering affects the edges of our selections. Adobe introduced the Refine Edge command into Photoshop CS3, and it has since been carried over into Photoshop CS4. Don't worry though, if you're using an older version of Photoshop, you can still follow this step-by-step technique and apply the feathering using the general feather method by going up to Select in the menu bar, moving down to Modify, and then clicking on Feather. Right then, let's get stuck into this technique and use feathering to its full advantage to help us soften our selection edges and rescue this photograph that's lacking in contrast. Open the file rnli.jpg into Photoshop from the Start Images folder on the DP CD. Zoom in to 50% by hitting Ctrl and plus a few times on your keyboard, and then hold down spacebar just to move through the image with the hand tool, scrolling up to the helicopter's rotary blades. Move across into the toolbox and pick out the polygonal lasso tool, and you might find that it's hiding underneath the lasso tool. Make sure the feather is set to 0 pixels in the options bar, and then just make a selection around the first helicopter blade. With the marching ants clearly showing around the first rotor blade, move up into the options bar and click on Add to Selection, and then use the polygonal lasso tool again to select the other 2 rotor blades. Having used the polygonal lasso tool to select the 3 rotary blades, we can now think about feathering our selection, and we can do that by going up to Select, down to Modify, across, and then down to Feather. Enter a feather radius of 20 pixels before hitting OK. So now that we've feathered our selection, we can make these blades a little bit more prominent in the frame by using a Levels Adjustment layer. Move up to Layer in the menu bar, and then scroll down to New Adjustment Layer, and then click on Levels. When this New Layer dialog box pops up, just hit OK. Once inside the levels, drag the shadow slider right to a value of around 50, and then once you've done that, just take hold of the highlight slider and drag this left to a value of around 236. Once you're happy with your levels adjustment, move up and hit OK. We're now going to make a selection around the outside of this helicopter, and then feather our selection and improve the contrast using curves. Moving across into the toolbox, hold down on the polygonal lasso tool and then select the lasso tool. Up in the options bar, make sure that you're selected on New Selection and the feather is set to 0 pixels. Use the lasso tool to make a careful selection around the outside of this helicopter. Having made our selection using the lasso tool, we can go up into the options bar and click on Refine Edge, or hit its keyboard shortcut, which is Ctrl-Alt and the letter R. The idea behind the Refine Edge dialog box is it offers a clearer and more visual way of viewing selection edges and how they're controlled using sliders like the feather slider. Inside the Refine Edge, there are 5 sliders that you can use to control the selection edge, and 5 different preview modes that line the bottom. These can be toggled through very quickly by hitting the letter F. On the left is the standard mode, then we've got the quick mask preview, and beside that we've got the on black preview. Then there's the on white preview, which we'll be using in this video, and at the end there's the mask preview. Moving further up and taking a look at the different sliders, we've got the radius slider at the top, which can be useful when we need to improve the selection edge in areas with soft transitions or fine details. The next slider down is the contrast slider, which is useful when we want to make soft edges crisper, and it also helps remove artifacts along the edges of our selections. The smooth slider can be used to smooth out jagged selection edges, and then moving down once more, there's the valuable feather slider, which softens the edges of our selections in the same way as when we go up to select, down to modify, and onto feather. The feather value can be set anywhere between 0 pixels and 250 pixels. The last slider to study is that of the contract and expand slider. This can be moved left, and it can also be moved right, depending on whether you want to contract or expand a selection edge. It's a handy slider that we'll use in this video, and it's also a good idea to move the slider from side to side for yourself to see how it works. Moving just beneath our sliders, make sure that you're selected on the On White preview so we can view our helicopter selection against a white background. Set the radius to a value of 0, and then moving down we want to set the contrast to a value of 25%. Set the smooth to 10, and then set the feather to 30 pixels. Moving down to the contract and expand slider, just go for a value of -15%. Once you've correctly inputted these values into your refine edge, just move up and then hit OK to feather our selection. Now go up to Layer and down to New Adjustment Layer before clicking on Curves. Just hit OK and the curves will load up on your screen. We want to create a strong S-curve to increase the contrast of this helicopter. So make one point on the line and drag this down, and then make another point on the line and then drag this up. Creating this strong S-curve will help darken the shadows and brighten the highlights within our selection. When you're happy with your S-curve, hit OK. So having improved the contrast of the helicopter, we can now concentrate on the lower half of the image. But to do this, we need to zoom out, so I'm just going to hit Ctrl and minus a couple of times on the keyboard. Next, go across into the toolbox and check that you're still selected on the lasso tool, and we now need to make a selection around the 3 RNLI lifeboat crew members in the foreground. As soon as you've got a selection that's similar to mine, you can load up the refine edge by holding down Ctrl, Alt and hitting the letter R. This time you want to input the following values. You want to set the radius to 0 pixels, the contrast to 15%, the smooth to 10, the feather to 35 pixels, and the contract expand to 0%. Just move up and hit OK. So having feathered our selection by 35 pixels using the refine edge, we're now ready to create another curves adjustment layer for our selected area. To do this, we just go up to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and then onto Curves, and hit OK. We're looking to make a similar S-curve to that we used on the previous helicopter adjustment. So just make one point and drag this down, and then make another point a little bit further up on the line and drag this up. As soon as you're happy with your curves adjustment, hit OK. We can really see that the contrast in our RNLI image has been improved, and that's because we feathered our selection edges before we went ahead and made levels and curves adjustment layers. There's one further area that I'd like to brighten, and that is the sky. You might think that this is going to be really difficult to do, but what I'm about to show you is how to add your previous selections together before inversing the selection, ready for us to apply a curves adjustment layer to the sky area only. Move into your Layers palette and hold down the Control key before clicking on your Curves 2 Layer Mask thumbnail. This will load up the marching ants around the lifeboat crew in the foreground of the image. Now, hold down Control and Shift at the same time and click on the Curves 1 Layer Mask thumbnail, and you'll see that the marching ants have appeared around the outside of the helicopter. Making sure you've still got Control and Shift held down, click on the Levels 1 Layer Mask thumbnail, and the rotor blades will also appear selected on your image. Move up to the menu bar and click on Select before choosing Inverse, and this will inverse the selection and the sky area will now be selected. It's very important that we feather our selection before we go ahead and create our final curves adjustment layer. So to load up the refine edge for the final time, hit Ctrl, Alt and the letter R. Input a radius amount of 0 pixels a contrast of 0%, a smooth value of 10, a feather of 40 pixels, and move the contract expand slider over towards the left hand side, settling for a value of -25%, and then hit OK. We're going to brighten this sky by using another curves adjustment layer. So go up to Layer in the menu bar, down to New Adjustment Layer, and click on Curves. Create a more gradual S-curve this time, compared with some of the other S-curves that we've created on some of the other selections, and the sky highlights will now appear much brighter. Just hit OK, and there we go. That's our final image. It's time to go up to File, and then down to Save As, to save this image in the desired location as a PSD Photoshop file. This will mean that you can come back to it at any stage and make any further adjustments should you need to. So next time you make any adjustments using selections, you now know how to feather your selections and the feather radius values that you should use. Remember to make the most of the refine edge if you're running CS3 or CS4, and you'll have a better visual view of how the feather affects the selection. I hope you've enjoyed this second masterclass feathering video, and I'll speak to you again very soon.